Welcome to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast, empowering you to take a whole person approach to your well-being, spirit, soul, and body. Join me, your host, Dr. Lara, naturopathic doctor, entrepreneur, and a servant of Jesus Christ. We are not just a body, we are spirit and soul. It's time to integrate medicine and spirituality into our healing. Let's get started. Welcome back to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lara. In this episode, we're going to talk about the impacts of seasonal depression disorder. And I'm having Christina, certified holistic counselor, join me again for this conversation. So welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So this episode is going to be airing, like the first week of December. But we know that during the cold months, a lot of people experience depression. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's seasonal for different reasons. Here in Arizona, we get a lot of sunlight. There's people that live in states that they don't get a whole lot of sunlight, but people in Arizona will still experience depression. Mm-hmm. And it could be a number of reasons, right? It could be just the holiday time. It brings a lot of emotional stuff up for people. Sometimes grieving can affect this time that we should be celebrating, right? And, and it could be not just the loss of a loved one. It could be the loss of a job or the loss of the old self, whatever loss is for the individual. It can bring up a lot. But we also are eating a lot of processed foods and holiday foods that are not always the best for us. And so let's talk a little bit about, obviously the importance of nutrition and exercise during this time, because those are really two big things that, I explain to patients. Like if you're eating and exercising, you really need to dive into it and be 100% compliant during this time that no one is being compliant with their diet. So let's go a little bit into that. Is there anything in particular that you work with patients around this topic?
Yeah. So for my clients, one of the things that I've noticed with seasonal affectiveness disorder, I'm not sure if they changed the moniker on that.
They may have, yeah.
They may have. Things are always shifting. One of the things that I've noticed is that for individuals for me, it's a year-round thing. So clients in Phoenix often will get it in the summertime because we're not outside as much. And people will say, well, I'm outside, at the pool. Okay, but what are you doing when you're at the pool? Are you drinking? Are you eating healthy foods? All these things. We need that vitamin D, which really is one of the reasons that we get depressed is that we're lacking vitamin D. So, clients in other areas of the country will get it in the wintertime because they're not outside as much and the days are shorter. So it's really getting outside when we can throughout the year, but then in those months, so for Phoenicians, it's typically in the winter. We are outside, we live outside. And I know, at least in the little vacuum that I'm in, we are always on mountains. We're always hiking and camping and doing different things. For people that the summer months are actually months that they go outside, really getting outside and getting that vitamin D when you have the opportunity so that we can fill what we're using and we can fill the storehouses of vitamin D so that when we're not outside as much during those winter months, it's not as bad. Or if we do take a supplemental vitamin D, it's not 50,000 IUs, it's 2,000. Yeah. It can be, or we can supplement with foods.
Yeah. When I test all my patients, especially if they're new, I test everyone for vitamin D levels. And unfortunately, almost everyone is low and sometimes extremely low. And so, if you're low, if your vitamin D is low, you're going to feel tired, you're going to feel depressed, are the common signs that we see. Obviously, it impacts your immune system and many other processes, but those are the top two that definitely people will feel. And I'll tell you, even people who work outside in here in Arizona, though it's sunny, they're still deficient in vitamin D. So it's there's many reasons why people are deficient in vitamin D. If they are getting sun exposure, you have to make sure your arms and your legs, your body is being exposed to it a good amount of time. But then if we go home and shower, it stops the process of the synthesizing, because it's based on the fat. The sunlight, the UV lights have to hit the fat in our skin to start the synthesizing of that vitamin D, right? Mm-hmm. And vitamin D, it's a process that it happens. It just doesn't come into your body and it's activated. It's, the digestive system is involved, your liver's involved, the kidneys activated. And so there's things that could inhibit the activation of active vitamin D in that. Do you know that fructose corn syrup will reverse active vitamin D?
I did not know that.
It does. So if people have diets with they're consuming a lot, of high fructose corn syrups, sodas and sauces and any of that,
everything,
it's going to reverse it. So you can be in the sun and do all that, but the kidneys will reverse it and put it in an inactive form. So what we eat matters. There's a lot of inflammation and these organs are not functioning optimal. Then you're not going to be able to process, activate and make it in the body, even through the diet. I have even seen people who have so much inflammation in their gut. There's so many digestive issues that even taking the oral form and testing it like a month later, they still don't get the levels up, quick enough with, taking high amounts of active vitamin D. So, it's because I know someone's going to see this like, well, was it D3? Of course. Why would I give anything else?
No, it was something else.
It's like, that's one of my pet peeves when someone tells me, did you know that this herb is good for that? And I'm like, yeah, thank you. Thank you for telling me what I know.
Right.
But yes, I do know that. So yeah, it's D3, that I give patients. But even then, the people with digestive issues will have a hard time. And usually what I give is a liquid form. It's easier to absorb through the oral, the buccal, and then, they'll ingest the rest and it'll help. So that's what I find is that there are people might not be able to get their vitamin D levels up because there's other health issues. Type 2 diabetes will make you more difficult. Kidney disease will make it more difficult for you to sustain vitamin D levels that are at a good amount. And then obesity. People who have obesity will have lower vitamin D levels. And one of the things that, our audience should understand, and most do by now because it's been talked about for the last 4 years everywhere, right? Yeah. Is that vitamin D is part of the steroid pathway. It's not like B12 vitamin where we can take B12 and we'll pee it out. Vitamin D is bound to a fat. And so that's why we can't have too much vitamin D, orally take too much because it'll stay longer in our body because it's bound to a fat. So vitamin D is very key. And yeah, you're right. Even in Arizona here, where it's hot, it's too hot. People don't go out. They avoid the sun. So the little bit that we can get from being in the sun, they're not getting it at all.
Yeah.
But even then, I will still find people here in the valley that during winter months, they're super down, depressed. I've had a couple patients that moved from like Seattle and, the Pacific Northwest where it's gloom and doom most of the time. And they come here and still like their brain has not been able to shake that off. Did you mention you lived up in the...
Yeah, so I was born in Seattle.
Yeah,
called it, my brother and I would call it people under the clouds.
People under the clouds.
So I lived on and off. I lived in the Seattle area, mostly from Everett up to Whidbey Island for 12 years, I believe. It's like 12 years. Kind of some other places I lived in between. And then I lived in the Portland, Oregon area for about 5 years. And when a newspaper article came out in Oregon that said that it had rained consistently for 120 days.
Oh, wow.
I was like, I am done.
Yeah.
I called one of my girlfriends. I was like, where are you? And she's like, oh, girl, I moved to Phoenix. And I was like, talk to me. And so I came to Phoenix to visit, and I remember my mom and my sister and I, we were looking for houses, and I was standing on the sidewalk with my arms out and my head up, just taking in the sun.
Just receiving those rays.
Oh my gosh. And I was defrosting. So I didn't know it at the time. I have Raynaud's. And so in the Pacific Northwest, my fingers and toes were often purple. And nothing I did would warm them up. And so I'm standing in the sun defrosting, and the gentleman showing us houses was like, "What are you doing?" He said, "You can't stand in the sun like that. You're going to dehydrate too fast." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "It's maybe 90 degrees. He goes, "It's 110.
Yeah.
And I was like, "What?" And so I said, I walked into the shade and I was like, "Okay, talk to me, because I don't understand dry heat apparently." So he gave me a breakdown. He said, "If you're going to live here, here's what you need to do." And even with that, so I definitely would get depressed living in the Pacific Northwest. Here, I get depressed in the summer. And it took me forever to figure out what was going on with me. And really, it's not even getting outside in the height of the heat. It's when the sun is rising. Go outside, sit, get some sunlight. 10, 15 minutes. It doesn't take a whole lot. Don't have sunglasses on. You know, I can't see anything when I take these off, but I take my glasses off and I just bask for a minute. Yeah. When I see the sun setting, I run outside.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm doing it last night. I'm helping my son with homework and cooking dinner. And I'm like, "Let's go." And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, "We're going outside."
Yeah, we need to be outside. We need to see, our retina needs to receive the sunlight, not lights internally, but from outside. It does a lot to our pituitary, our brain, when we receive those rays.
Helps to produce melatonin in our body and regulate our circadian rhythm. I had insomnia for 30 years. So I personally
could not live where it rains or it's cloudy. I just couldn't. That to me would be...
It's a lot.
Yeah, just put me in a coffin, because I couldn't do it. Even here in Arizona, when it gets cloudy, everyone gives me a hard time. Like, "Oh, Anna," like, I can't. There's some people who their natural constitution, it's sunlight, or some people can do clouds and rain and all of that. I don't do clouds.
Yeah.
Every once in a while.
You grew up here too.
Look, let me tell you, I grew up here in the valley. We did not have AC units. We had swamp coolers. So here's another thing too that I think has affected our physiology and our mental health a lot. Our bodies adapted to the heat being here. So we have swamp coolers, which means it's still hot and muggy in there.
Yeah.
So we would be running outside in the hot pavement, no shoes. We were outdoors. It didn't matter if it was summer. Do you know that? Like, kids don't do that now. I don't see kids in the neighborhood outside. And we would spend our time outside. Yeah, if in the evenings when it was summertime, we would spend most of the cooler part of the day. But our bodies adapted to that kind of heat. We had cars that didn't have AC. We rolled our windows down.
I know, you get that
to get some hot air, blowing on our face, so we didn't suffocate in the running car, right? But our bodies adapted to that, and it was no big deal. I have a harder time now with coming, being in a room that's air conditioned, going outside in the heat, into my car that's air conditioned. All that time that your body has to adapt to this cold room, to hot outside, to a cold car, and then hot, all of that back and forth. Our thyroid has to work to regulate the body temperature. And people who have thyroid issues notice that when there's a weather change, like from cold to hot, well, here we have two extremes, right?
Yeah.
It just all of a sudden happens. But when the summer starts, people with thyroid issues will feel tired because their body's having to work harder to keep the body's temperature cool, right? And then when it changes to winter, boom, another shift in season where now it's cold, and now your thyroid, the thermostat, it's working hard to keep your body warm at 98.6 degrees. So it's not uncommon to see people who have hypothyroidism who have low temperatures. They're 97 or so. That's a sign that there's a thyroid issue. Even if you haven't been diagnosed with a thyroid issue, if your body temperature is under 98.6, you might have a thyroid issue. And so with the seasonal changes into the cooler months, you'll see people with thyroid issues, people who are iron deficient, who have iron deficiency anemia, vitamin D deficiencies. Like, you'll see these people really struggle throughout these months. Of course, people who have like rheumatoid arthritis or arthritis in their joints and hands, they hate the wintertime because they're in so much pain because of the cooler, you know, even if it's 60 degrees here, someone in another state is like, oh my God, you guys have it, it's nothing. For someone who lives here, 60 degrees, 50 degrees, it's a huge change from 100 in hell, right?
Oh, and then I let people know that too, you know, in just trying to get them to understand. I'm like, okay, from 80 degrees to 20, is that cold? Yeah. And they're like, yes. And I said, exactly. It's a 60 degree temperature drop. So when we go from 120 degrees to 60, that is a 60 degree temperature drop. It's huge. But movement is huge.
Big time.
When you are recovering from trauma, when you're, you know, in fawn or freeze, even in fight or flight, the movement that we do will affect our nervous system. It affects our joints. The older I got, I started noticing when I'm in, you know, like moist climates, like back in the Pacific Northwest, I have arthritis in my hands. I don't notice it here. It's a dry climate. I'm constantly moving. When I do notice it, I take a small amount of boron and it completely goes away, which is amazing. And making sure that I'm getting enough vitamins, minerals, and eating healthy food, getting outside when I can. Magnesium is huge because that helps raise vitamin D levels. I was one of those people where I was taking D3 and it wasn't doing anything. So I started getting outside, taking magnesium on top of it, and then my levels finally started to go up. So it's like this puzzle. You know, as in what we do, it's helping find these puzzle pieces and saying, hey, here's what's going to work. And okay, we have found everything, but there's still a missing piece.
And sometimes, you know what? Sometimes it might just be you need to get up and move. So I shared this before in another episode, but I'll share it here again because it really ties in. You know, genetically, everyone is different. And so there are people who there's a gene called the COMT gene, COMT. And this gene, you know, people can pay for it and get tested. And I know I did it several years ago because I was curious. And this gene will tell you if you have how your nervous system regulates and many other, you know, factors, other health factors. Really, I did it for health reasons. But this lets you know how resilient you are to stress and to pain and many other factors. So I have what's called the warrior gene. So this gene, you know, when people have that gene, what that means is that for example, I make more of a particular enzyme that breaks down neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are signals from the brain, and it helps. Some of them are excitatory and some are inhibitory. So they regulate emotions and many other processes in the body, right? But if my body is making more of this enzyme that breaks down neurotransmitters faster, that means I don't feel. So I'm not going to feel pain. My births were natural pain, and I mean no pain medication. And the doctors were like, that should hurt a lot. Like, you sure you don't want anything? I'm like, nope. I didn't. And either. Even if I've in the past, when I was in my 20s, I had migraines, never took anything for it. I would just tough it out. You know, natural things like that I would do, or I would just tough it out. But I do have a high pain tolerance. Also, I don't feel stress the way someone else might feel stress. If I see a stressful situation, I am running to the scenario, to the scene, instead of running away from it. You know, that's me genetically, but that's my personality too. So, but the downside from those neurotransmitters being broken down so fast and not feeling is that it does predispose me to feeling depressed. Now, I might not have any social stuff going on, nothing. My diet could be right. I'm doing everything right. And then I just feel like not stimulated, like just down, you know? And so over the years, I you have to learn and pay attention to yourself. And for me, I know that the winter months for me, I crank up my workout. I'm going to be hiking, more frequent than I would normally do. 2, 3. There's been years that I was hiking 4 or 5 times a week, which I would feel guilty because then I would feel like they're going to think I'm being extreme. But then this is what I did, audience. I sat my family down and I had to address the shame in that. I had to say, I told my husband, I told my mom, I told my girls, hey, I know it may seem like I'm hiking a lot, but this is my antidepressant. So I'd rather get up in the morning and go hike for, 30, 40 minutes an hour and feel good the rest of the day instead of turning to a substance, turning to food. And once I had that conversation, they're like, yeah, that's fine. So I made hiking part of my medicine. Working out at the gym is my medicine.
Absolutely.
It's good to look good, but I do it to feel good because I don't want to be on. I've never done antidepressant drugs. I've never done any medications. I've done herbal stuff and so forth. But even then, those things had a limitation. So I could have a clean diet. I could have all these herbal stuff, the homeopathics, do all of these other practices. But ultimately, what I needed was to move my body. Because when we move our body, those neurotransmitters and hormones, everything changes. You're stimulated. You feel. So I literally have to cause some pain and discomfort in my body for my brain to feel good. And I bet you that a lot of people who are watching this who say, I've suffered from depression, get moving. Move your body. The hard part about it is starting. I know you don't want to. There's days I don't want to. But then I'm like, hey, I know the moment I get going, and I've told you this before, like I was not going to work out today, but I'm going to do it. And then I'm so glad I did it. I feel better about doing it. So there's that part, like you cannot not move your body, Plus, if you're outside in the elements, right, you're going to get the sunlight. So you're getting your vitamin D synthesizing there. You're getting fresh air. You're out in nature. There's nothing, technology and other things that are stimulating to you, but just moving and flowing in that state.
Yeah.
What do you do to help you when you're feeling like, I don't even like to call it depressed. I say when I'm feeling down.
Yes. So for myself, and even for some of my clients, they're like, I don't want to go to a gym. And I'm like, you don't have to. How about you walk 20 to 30 minutes and just make a goal to start small, 20 minutes 3 times a week. And when that becomes a habit, move it to 30 minutes 3 times a week. And when that's a habit, do push-ups and sit-ups. You don't have to go to a gym. We need physical pressure on our muscles, not just to have strong muscles, but to have strong bones as well.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't understand that. So working out is not so we look a certain way. I mean, it can be, absolutely, if that's our goals, but it is so that this, curated machine that we're in can function properly.
Yeah, God made the body to move.
We have to move.
We talked about this last week.
Yes.
We had a little conversation and we were like, how can people not believe in God when you study the body, the human body?
Yes.
Right? And you understand all the different processes that are happening. This couldn't have just happened out of a boom, out of a bang.
Yeah, I say we didn't, crawl our way out of primordial goo, and this is it. And I think I've been slowly inching my way through this book that is a broad, sweeping explanation of neuroscience. And just being able to move my hand without it being a forefront conscious thought, and how the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems activate, slow down. There's things happening in my brain, in my neck, just to move my arm like this is phenomenal.
Yes.
And how beautifully it works. And that there are things that we can do that inhibit that. Not moving is one of them. The foods that we eat and causing inflammation, the supplements that we're taking. We could be taking supplements that are not right for us.
Absolutely.
And One of the things that I let my clients know, I say, if you take a supplement and you take it for a while and it's working, but then it starts making you sick, that's your body talking to you.
Yeah.
Stop taking Don't take it.
Yeah.
So for myself, one of the things that I do is, especially in the summertime when I do feel down, or there are times where I have an absence of emotion. I'm not happy. I'm not sad. I just am.
Blah.
It's not even...
just like a neutral.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm existing. I don't have to be high or low. I just am. And I had the conversation yesterday with my son, actually, about the absence of emotion does not equal depression. We can just be and exist. And I think we're very comfortable in our society thinking that we have to feel intensely.
I agree with that.
Where we don't. Some days just are. Some moments just are.
Yeah.
There's no... we really don't have to be on these high highs or low lows all the time. So I do notice that if I have several days where I just am, that I'm like, am I moving enough? Not that I have to have a high, but I'm like, where am I at mentally? Where am I at emotionally? Yeah, I check in with myself. Yeah. What am I doing? I go to the gym a lot. There are days where I go to the gym and I'm like, I just don't have it today, but I'm going to move for 35 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I get on a treadmill, I'll do a rower. The gym that we go to has the circuit. And so it's just a circuit. You don't even have to think. You just go from one machine to the next. You get a full body workout and then you can leave. It is really actively moving my body, making sure that I'm not giving into those cravings.
Yeah.
People say, well, I wanted it, or I deserve it, or, we make excuses for things. And I'm like, yes, I am craving cupcakes and an entire bag of chips. However, if I eat that, how am I going to feel? My soul might feel good now, but tomorrow I'm not going to feel well.
Your body and your brain won't. Yeah.
Absolutely. So making sure my diet is on point, making sure that my supplements, that I'm taking them, I'm not going to get them through osmosis, just sitting in that cabinet.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
So that.
Right? I'm like, I touch them and I get them.
If you don't take them, they don't work. It's usually what I tell people, like, have you been taking this? No. Yes. Well, then it's not going to work.
Yeah. I purchased the supplement thingies that, I put all my supplements in to prepare like I do a meal. And I make sure that I am taking those supplements regularly. For me, like fish oil is huge.
Yeah, huge for the brain.
Huge.
The brain needs that omega-3.
And
I don't think people
PTSD,
understand. The brain is mostly made up. It's made up of nothing but phospholipids, which is fat.
Yeah.
So it needs to have healthy fat. So if people are suffering with depression, they need to make sure they're getting enough omega-3s in there. It's going to reduce inflammation. It's going to help and enhance your mood, your memory, all of that. It's very important. Yeah, and the nutrition part of it is just key, getting the healthy fats, getting enough protein, reducing the sugars, things that cause that inflammation.
Also focus on foods that are high in tryptophan.
Yeah.
So I'm allergic to dairy, so that takes out a number of things, but there is poultry is fantastic. Mm-hmm. Oatmeal is fantastic. Yeah. Eggs, if you can eat them. Focusing on foods that are high in tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin, really helps to just give our body a little bit of an edge up. Mm-hmm. We can take tryptophan, we can take 5-HTP, we can do things to kind of supplement, but if we're focusing on these foods... And
just eat the food. Yeah. It's just better, because there's other things that... if you eat the egg, there's other things that you're getting from the egg, the omega-3, the protein, selenium.
Choline, cholesterol.
Yeah, you're getting all these other things that it's almost more cost effective to eat the food.
Literally.
Is what I tell people. I do these neurotransmitter testing in my office. It's a urine collection that the patient does at home, and it looks at all these neurotransmitters. You do the salivary testing as well. But what's very interesting about these testing is it's always hand in hand with a person, how they feel and what they're experiencing mentally or physically. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of these supplements you can get over the counter, And people just read online and they think, oh, I should take this to help me for that. And I oftentimes find like, oh, you're taking GABA. Your GABA is way too high. Let's stop taking that. And even without the supplement, their GABA is too high. So now we need to do things to help, bring it down naturally through diet and lifestyle changes. But neurotransmitter testing is one of those tests that people don't know about. And it is an option. And yeah, your medical doctor is not going to tell you about it because they don't do it. Even neurologists won't do it, this kind of testing. And no, your insurance company won't cover it either. But, $200, $250 for this test can be so critical for some people that can let me know.
I was just wondering how much it costs.
Yeah,
so
it's about $250, guys. I mean, people spend that eating out, on a night out.
Literally.
And this is telling you information that what your body is doing. People who tell me I have ADHD, ADD, or these neurological conditions, I'm like, okay, well, let's test. Because if that's what you have, the neurotransmitters are going to show this one's too excitatory or inhibitory. And so it'll give me real information. And then there's the guidance of this is what you do nutrition, this is what you do with physical activity or herbs and medicine, or natural herbs or supplements of what we need to do or avoid to regulate that. And it's a game changer. Like, you don't have to guess to know what to take,
That is...
I want to say thank you. I'm not going to let this moment go. You said some things that really spoke to me. And I just want to say thank you because even as a doctor, sometimes we know too much.
Yeah.
Right? And we get caught up in all the information and all the things that we know, all the tricks and tools that we have, at our disposal. But I want to address the importance of that. You're right. Our society, we somehow get in our minds that we either need to be up or down. And then when you're in this neutral state of I am, there's so much peace there that it feels off. It feels off because when you're around other people, they don't have that. And I've been feeling like that, for a long time since my dad passed away. So several months here. And I have moments where I just feel so neutral. Like, I'm not sad. I'm not angry. I'm not irritable. I just am. And that there's no better word than to say, I just am here right now and I'm good.
Yes.
And people don't get it. It's like the outside world wants to see me falling apart or crying or, dramatic, or I just am. I'm in peace. Isn't that the ultimate goal?
That's the goal.
But the world
for myself,
it is our goal. Everyone wants that. But when you're there and you're consistently in this space of I am okay, I am blessed, I am peace, I am love,
I am safe.
I am safe.
That's huge.
I am healthy.
Yes.
I am.
I just am.
And
it's okay.
And it's more than okay.
Yeah,
that's the goal.
Good.
It's good.
So thank you for sharing that. That is one of the things that I struggled with. I started taking a supplement for ADHD because it started the older I got in perimenopause. At one point, I found myself, I was literally so overwhelmed that I was walking in circles in my kitchen, and my husband stops me, he grabs me, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I started crying. I go, I don't know what I'm doing. Everything has to be done right now. And so him and I together researched supplements for ADHD. I went through a couple until I found this one, and I could feel my brain shifting.
Yeah.
And for months, I kept talking to my girlfriend saying, I think I'm depressed. I really think I'm depressed. And then I got to the space where I'm like, I'm not.
Yeah.
My brain is so calm and so at ease. I can finally prioritize things. I can make a list and stick to it. It's amazing. I can do one thing at a time and finish the task to completion.
I hear this a lot.
Right?
I hear this a lot from patients because you know why? Because what happens is your norm was revved up all the time. So when you're normal, you don't know. It's it's a new norm for you. I see this with children that I work with that have ADHD or have other neurological conditions. When they're regulated, I do a lot of cranial sacral, like hands-on therapy. When they're calm, they'll say, I'm tired. And I'm like, no, honey, this is what it feels like to be calm.
Yes.
And so they're like, oh. So it's interesting. It takes time for the brain to adapt to this new, like, normal. Like, what's your normal was not what you were before. That's amazing. Before we wrap up, you shared a story with me, and I want you to share it with our audience.
Yeah.
You're talking about the hummingbird hawk moth. Tell us quickly about that.
So I absolutely love this story. So we had a garden in our backyard, and we noticed that one of our tomato plants was completely getting decimated. And so I'm looking, and I finally find this hornworm. And it might be a caterpillar, but it's called a hornworm. I haven't looked too hard into it, but it's green, and it will eat everything in your garden. And so any gardener will say, give it to the chickens, throw it away, kill it. It doesn't matter. These things are horrible. They will decimate your garden. They will completely destroy everything. So one day I'm walking outside. It's nighttime, and I hear this noise across the way of my yard. And my mother-in-law lives with us, and she has flowers all over the place, which is great because she can actually grow things, whereas I can't. And so I walk over to where the hollyhocks are, and they're 6 feet tall. And I'm looking, and I see this thing flying around, and my brain is struggling to grasp what I'm even looking at. And I'm like, is it a hummingbird? Is it a moth? What is this thing? So I film it just so I can try to figure out what I'm looking at. And I run in to get my husband, I drag him outside, and he's like, what is this thing? Lo and behold, it is a moth that flaps its wings as fast as a hummingbird and pollinates flowers at night like a hummingbird. It looks like a hummingbird, but it's a moth. And it's a hummingbird hawk moth. And I'm like, where do these things come from? Well, lo and behold, they come from the hornworm. And I was sharing this story again with my sister-in-law, who has these 6 foot tall weeds all over her 5 acres, and they were covered in hornworms. And I was like, look, don't kill these things. I said, one, they're going to eat your weeds. They're gardening for free. But even when we look at something in nature that is causing destruction, especially, my goodness, with hurricanes and stuff like that, but often in respects to people, we look at people in their journey and we say, look at all the destruction that they're causing. They're a horrible person. How could they be like this? We look at these stories of people in the Bible, and they wreak havoc all over the place, but we uplift them when they have conquered, right? But we don't do that today. We look at minuscule aspects. We look at the hornworm eating the tomato plant and say, you're ruining my life. I don't want you here. Or look at all the destruction that this person is causing. But literally that destruction is the very growth that they need. That's the food that they need to encourage them to morph into something more beautiful. So I really sat and processed this, where I realized that my journey, and I laid waste to certain friendships, horrible habits with myself, all of that brought me to where I am today. And I'm in the midst of my journey. It's not even done yet.
Right.
But I was like, yes, like I have completely, by the grace of God, transformed into a new being. Whereas before, everything I was doing was destructive to myself and those around me. But God used that to bring me to a place that I am today, where my goal now is to help people. Mostly, I can help people around the world and within the United States, but really focused on Maricopa County. I really would like to help people in Maricopa County with trauma and substance use recovery. And I started getting into teaching teenagers practices, nutrition and wellness practices, to help them when they are catapulted into adulthood at the age of 18. And a lot of resources are cut off at that point, and helping them so they don't struggle as I did.
Amen. Beautiful story. It is just such a beautiful story. I thank you for sharing that. How can our audience, if they're interested in reaching out and working with you, what's the best way that they can do so?
Yes, so on my website, nutritionwellnessaz.com, has all my contact information. I'm on a number of different social media platforms at Christina Nutrition and Wellness. You can find me and email me there, or just absolutely get in touch with me through my website.
Okay, thank you, Christina, for joining me in this episode and sharing that beautiful story. We'll make sure to link Christina's information on this episode and the previous one as well. So that way, if you're interested in reaching out, she can work with you and customize, a nutrition plan that works best for you. I hope you've enjoyed this episode on nutrition and exercise and the importance on mental health during these seasonal changes that we go through. Thank you for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. And until next time, be blessed. Thank you for listening to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. If you like what you've heard, please like, share, and subscribe. Help this message reach more people who may need to hear it. Leave your comments. I want to know what you think. If you're interested in learning more about Raices, visit our website at raicesndmedcenter.com. Until next time, be blessed.